welcome to the deep dive. Today we're diving into human social cognition with excerpts from Tadeusz Zawidzki's book Mindshaping,
Okay.
and we're going to explore how we learn from each other, cooperate and coordinate, and why humans are so unique in these abilities.
Yeah, it's a really fascinating area, and we'll be looking at how Zawidzki challenges the traditional view that you need to be a mind reader, an expert mind reader, to understand each other. He suggests that instead we shape each other's minds through these much simpler but really, really effective mechanisms, like conformity and imitation.
So the traditional view is that we have to build these complex models
Yeah.
of other people's thoughts and feelings in order to cooperate.
Yeah, that's right. It's called the mind-dreading first hypothesis.
Right.
But Zawidzki points out, that's a lot of mental heavy lifting.
Yeah.
Accurately representing all the nuances of somebody's beliefs and desires is a massive computational task.
It sounds exhausting, like trying to solve a giant Sudoku puzzle while juggling flaming torches.
Yeah, exactly.
No wonder we need a simpler system.
And Zawidzki proposes that. He calls this alternative mind shaping. And instead of just reading minds, we actively shape each other's minds through learning, conforming to social norms, and sharing stories and narratives.
So it's more like we're all kind of collaboratively building a shared reality
Yeah.
rather than trying to peek into each other's individual mental worlds.
Yeah, that's a really nice way of putting it. And this, collaborative construction of reality starts very early in life. Think about how much children learn simply through imitation. There's this fascinating experiment where researchers gave a puzzle box to both chimpanzees, chimps, and human children, and they showed them, demonstrated how to get a treat out of it. One of the steps was completely unnecessary to actually getting the treat.
Right.
But guess what? The chimps, always focused on efficiency, skipped that pointless step.
Right.
But the human children, they copied every single step, even the useless one.
It's like when I was a kid, I'd watch my dad fix things around the house. I didn't understand what he was doing, but I'd try to copy his every move, down to the way he held the screwdriver.
That's a perfect example. It turns out this, what they call over-imitation,
Right.
is a crucial part of human learning. We're wired to absorb information from others, even if we don't fully grasp the reasons behind their actions. And research suggests this starts very, very early. For example, studies show that infants are remarkably sensitive to what researchers call natural pedagogy, where they interpret even unintentional adult actions as teaching moments.
So even if I trip and bump my head, a baby might think I'm demonstrating some profound life lesson.
Well, maybe not that extreme, but there was this study where an adult touched a light switch with their head.
Right.
If they had their hands free, the infants saw it as intentional
Right.
and tried to copy it. But if the adult's hands were full, they didn't bother. It's like they understood that the adult had a reason for using their head in that specific situation.
Wow, that's incredible. So even from infancy, we're constantly looking for meaning and trying to understand the intentions behind other people's actions.
And this drive to learn from and connect with others, it extends beyond just sort of conscious imitation. Have you ever noticed how you sometimes unconsciously mirror someone's body language when you're talking to them?
Oh, absolutely.
It's called the chameleon effect.
Yeah, I catch myself doing that all the time. Like if I'm talking to someone who's leaning forward, I find myself leaning in too.
Yeah, that's it. This kind of automatic behavior matching helps build rapport and connection without us even realizing it. It shows just how deeply ingrained our social nature is. And it speaks to this broader point. Humans aren't just concerned with individual gain. We also have this deep-seated desire for fairness and social harmony.
Right. And we're not just mimicking for the sake of it. We're actually conforming to these social norms, even when it comes at a personal cost. Like in that experiment, the ultimatum game,
Right.
where people are willing to punish unfair behavior, even if it means they get less themselves.
Exactly. The ultimatum game is a great example. It's played across cultures, and consistently people reject unfair offers, even if it means receiving nothing.
Yeah.
This suggests a powerful drive to uphold social norms and maintain fairness, even in anonymous interactions.
So it's like we're not just conforming blindly, we're actually conforming to a set of shared values that help maintain social order.
Right.
It makes sense. If everyone's playing by the same rules, things run more smoothly.
Right, exactly. And this brings us back to mind shaping. These pressures to conform, whether we're conscious of them or not, they subtly mold our behavior and ultimately shape our minds. We internalize those shared values and norms, making them part of who we are. But how did this cooperative mind-shaping tendency evolve in the first place? It seems a bit counterintuitive when we think about, survival of the fittest.
Right. Usually think of evolution being all about competition, not collaboration.
Yeah.
So how does cooperation fit into the picture?
Well, there are a couple of prevailing theories about that. One, the Machiavellian intelligence hypothesis suggests that our complex minds developed as a way to outsmart and outmaneuver our social competitors. Basically, we got clever to manipulate each other.
So it's like a mental arms race
Yeah.
with everyone trying to be one step ahead.
Yeah, that's the idea. But Zawidzki, he leans towards a different theory, one that emphasizes the crucial role of information sharing and learning in early human cooperation. Think about those, early hunter-gatherer societies. Survival depended on sharing knowledge about things like tracking prey, making tools, finding safe shelter.
So instead of constantly competing, those early humans realized that working together and sharing information was actually the key to survival.
Right.
That's a much more positive spin on things.
Definitely. And this is where a major transition in human evolution comes in, something called the broad spectrum revolution. This period, roughly 100,000 to 40,000 years ago, saw humans shifting to more diverse food sources and developing more complex social structures.
So they went from just hunting big game to gathering plants, fishing, and having more intricate social interactions. Sounds like things were getting a lot more complicated.
You got it. And this increased complexity made accurate mind reading even more challenging. Imagine trying to keep up with the thoughts and motivations of a much larger and more diverse group of individuals.
Yeah, that would be like trying to learn every language on Earth at the same time. My brain would fry.
That's precisely Zawidzki's point. He argues that mind shaping, with its emphasis on conformity, imitation, and teaching, offered a more efficient and robust solution for maintaining cooperation in these increasingly complex social environments.
So instead of trying to decipher everyone's individual thoughts, these early humans relied on these shared practices to create a sense of predictability and stability.
Right.
It's like developing a social shorthand that everyone understands.
Exactly. Mind shaping provided this framework for coordinating actions and maintaining social order without requiring everyone to be a mind reading expert. But what about language? We haven't talked about that yet. Isn't language all about expressing complex thoughts and understanding each other's minds?
Right. It seems like language would be crucial for mind reading.
Yeah.
But how does it fit into the mind-shaping picture?
That's where Zawidzki offers some really fascinating insights. He suggests that language may have initially evolved not as a tool for mind reading, but as a form of costly signaling.
Costly signaling. So like a peacock showing off its feathers to attract a mate? We were just trying to impress each other with our fancy words.
Yeah, that's a fun analogy. Though it goes deeper than just trying to, sound impressive. Think of it like this. Imagine a musician who invests years of dedicated practice to master an instrument. Right. That dedication and skill is a costly signal, demonstrating their commitment and talent.
So by using complex language, early humans were signaling their willingness to cooperate and their competence in social interactions.
Yeah.
It's like saying, hey, I'm a valuable member of the group. You can trust me.
That's the idea. And this signaling function of language, it could have gradually led to the more sophisticated forms of mind reading that we see in humans today. It's a fascinating reversal of the traditional view that language simply reflects pre-existing complex thoughts. Instead, Zawidzki is suggesting that language itself might have played a role in shaping those complex thoughts.
So language wasn't just mirroring our minds, it was actively shaping them. That's a pretty mind-blowing idea.
It is, and it raises some fascinating questions about mind reading in infants and how they learn language. Recent research suggests that babies might pass nonverbal versions of what's called the false belief task much earlier than we thought. This task is designed to test whether someone understands that another person can hold a belief that's different from reality.
But I thought we didn't develop that ability until we were much older. How could babies possibly understand something that complex?
That was the prevailing view. But these new findings are challenging that assumption. And this is where Zawidzki's alternative interpretation comes in. He argues that these results don't necessarily mean that infants possess a fully developed understanding of beliefs.
Okay, so if they're not reading minds in the traditional sense, what are they doing?
He suggests that infants might be using a more basic form of understanding. He calls it a rudimentary intentional stance. Instead of attributing complex beliefs to others, they're simply trying to understand actions in terms of goals
Yeah.
and the immediately available information.
So they're like tiny detectives observing behavior and trying to figure out what someone's trying to achieve in that specific situation.
Exactly. And this has big implications for how we think about language acquisition. There's this long-standing argument that children need sophisticated mind-reading abilities to learn word meanings.
Because to understand what a word means, you need to know what the speaker is thinking when they use it.
Right. But Zawidzki suggests that a simpler intentional stance, coupled with an understanding of communicative goals, might be enough. So when I point at a ball and say ball, a baby doesn't need to fully grasp my mental state. They just need to understand that I'm trying to tell them something about that round object.
So it's less about deciphering complex mental states and more about recognizing patterns and intentions in social interactions.
Exactly. And this leads us to Zawitsky's most thought-provoking idea, which we'll delve into further after a quick break. He suggests that attributing complex beliefs and desires to others might be more about justifying actions and managing social impressions than accurately reading minds.
Wait, are you suggesting we're all just putting on a show, pretending to understand each other's thoughts and feelings? That's a bit unsettling.
It's not necessarily about pretending, but rather about the role these attributions play in our social interactions. We'll unpack this further in part 2 of this deep dive.
This is already giving me a whole new perspective on how we interact and understand each other. I can't wait to dive back in after the break. Okay, my mind is still buzzing from that last point. Are you saying that we're not as good at reading minds as we think we are?
It's not that we're not capable of understanding others' mental states, but Zawitsky argues that our primary motivation might not be about achieving perfect accuracy. Instead, he proposes that we often use these attributions of beliefs and desires to justify actions, both our own and others, and to manage social impressions.
So it's less about being like mind-reading detectives and more about crafting narratives that make sense of the social world.
Exactly. We're all storytellers in a way, constantly weaving narratives to explain behavior. And to maintain a positive social image, Zawitsky calls these culturally shaped explanations self-constituting narratives, and they play this huge role in mind shaping.
So the stories we tell ourselves and others about why we do the things we do are heavily influenced by the culture we're raised in.
That's a key point. Our culture provides the framework for these narratives. Different cultures have different values and beliefs and ways of interpreting the world, which leads to vastly different stories.
That makes a lot of sense. So it's not just about individual minds shaping each other. It's about this larger cultural context shaping all of our minds collectively.
Precisely. Culture provides the set of shared assumptions and expectations. Think of it like a set of rules for the game of social life. Some rules are explicit, like laws, but many are implicit, like unspoken social norms or expectations about behavior.
It's like knowing when it's appropriate to make eye contact or how close to stand to someone while talking. Those unspoken rules vary drastically from culture to culture.
Exactly. Those subtle cultural cues can dramatically impact how we interpret each other's actions and intentions. It can even influence how we experience and express emotions.
Wait, are you saying that culture can actually shape how we feel things? I thought emotions were purely biological.
While the underlying biology of emotions is universal, how we interpret and express those emotions is definitely shaped by our cultural background. Some cultures emphasize emotional restraint, while others encourage outward expressions of feelings.
So someone raised in a culture that values stoicism might experience sadness differently from someone raised in a culture that encourages open emotional expression.
That's the idea. It's not that one person feels sadness less intensely, but rather the way they understand and express that sadness will be filtered through their cultural lens.
This is making me realize just how much I've taken my own cultural background for granted. It's like I'm seeing the world with fresh eyes.
That's one of the amazing things about exploring these ideas. It challenges us to examine our assumptions and to appreciate the diversity of human experience. And it all ties back into this powerful concept of mind shaping. It's not simply about mimicking actions or conforming to social norms. It's about internalizing this whole set of cultural values and beliefs that shape how we perceive the world, understand ourselves, and interact with others.
Okay, so we've got this big complex system of mind shaping going on with individuals, culture, and language all playing a role. It's incredible, but it also feels a bit overwhelming. Like, how much control do we actually have over our own minds if they're being constantly shaped by all these external forces?
That's a big question, and one that philosophers have been wrestling with for centuries. There are no easy answers. But the mind-shaping framework does offer some valuable insights.
Okay, I'm eager to hear what those insights might be.
First, mind shaping emphasizes that our minds are not isolated entities. They're constantly being shaped by our interactions with others and the cultural world we inhabit.
We're like sponges soaking up influences from everything and everyone around us.
That's a great analogy. And
Yeah.
this means that we have a responsibility to be aware of the influences that are shaping our minds. Are we passively accepting the narratives and beliefs that are handed to us, or are we actively questioning and challenging them?
So instead of just being molded, we can become active shapers of our own minds. But how do we do that? It's not like we can just choose to ignore all the cultural influences around us.
You're right. It's not about shutting out the world. It's about engaging with it critically and recognizing that the stories we tell ourselves and the beliefs we hold are often shaped by forces outside of our conscious awareness.
It's like becoming aware of the puppet strings even if we can't completely cut them loose.
Exactly. It's about recognizing the limitations of our own perspectives and being open to alternative ways of seeing the world.
That makes sense. But how do we actually become more aware of these unconscious influences? Seems like a tricky thing to do.
There are several practices that can help. Mindfulness, for example, can help us become more aware of our thoughts and feelings without judgment. Self-reflection is key, as is exposing ourselves to diverse perspectives.
So reading books by authors from different cultures, traveling to new places, having conversations with people who have different viewpoints, all of these can help us broaden our horizons and challenge our assumptions.
Absolutely. Those experiences can be incredibly enriching and eye-opening. They help us break free from our echo chambers and appreciate the complexity of the world.
So instead of just going along with the flow, we can start to notice the currents that are pushing us in certain directions. And maybe even choose to swim against the tide sometimes.
Exactly. Once we become aware of those currents, we can start to navigate them more consciously. We can choose which influences we want to embrace and which ones we want to resist.
It's like taking the wheel of our own mental ship instead of just drifting along wherever the wind takes us.
That's a powerful image. And it reminds us that while our minds are constantly being shaped, we are not simply passive recipients of those influences. We have the capacity to become active participants in the process of shaping our own minds.
Okay, I'm starting to see how this all ties together, but let's bring it back down to earth for a minute. What are some specific things we can do in our everyday lives to become more conscious mind shapers?
One simple but powerful practice is to pay attention to the language we use. The words we choose shape our thoughts and how we perceive the world.
So instead of saying, I'm always so stressed, I could say, I'm feeling overwhelmed right now. That shifts the focus from a permanent state of being to a temporary feeling.
Exactly. And that subtle shift in language can have this ripple effect on our thoughts and emotions. It helps us create a more empowering narrative.
So it's not just about using positive affirmations or anything like that. It's about being mindful of the language we use and how it might be shaping our reality.
Precisely. Another powerful practice is to cultivate curiosity and open-mindedness. Be willing to challenge your own assumptions and listen to perspectives that are different from your own.
That reminds me of something we talked about earlier, the importance of being exposed to diverse cultures and ways of thinking. It's like expanding our mental map of the world.
Exactly. Travel, reading, engaging with people from different backgrounds. All of these experiences can broaden our horizons and help us see the world from multiple perspectives.
It's like adding more colors to our mental palette. And that richer palette allows us to create more nuanced and insightful interpretations of the world around us.
That's a beautiful way to put it. And that brings us to the final part of our deep dive. We've explored how mind shaping works on an individual and cultural level, but where does it leave us in terms of the bigger picture? What does mind shaping tell us about what it means to be human?
That's the ultimate question, isn't it? I'm ready to go deep. Give me the mind-shaping perspective on the human condition. All right, let's tackle that big question. What does mind-shaping tell us about what it means to be human?
Well, one of the most fundamental insights from this perspective is that human beings are profoundly social creatures. We're not designed to exist in isolation, connection, learning from each other, shaping each other's minds. These are woven into the very fabric of our being.
So it's not just that we like to hang out with each other. Our social nature is actually essential to who we are, even down to how our brains are wired.
Exactly. Our brains have evolved to thrive. In social environments, we're constantly picking up cues, mirroring behaviors, and adjusting our understanding of the world based on our interactions with others.
It makes me think of that old saying, no man is an island.
Right.
We're all part of this larger ecosystem of minds, constantly influencing and being influenced by each other.
That's a perfect way to put it. And this interconnectedness has profound implications
Mhm.
for how we understand ourselves if we're constantly shaping and being shaped by others. What does that mean for the idea of a self? Do we even have, a stable, unchanging core identity?
That's a big one.
Yeah.
I've always thought of myself as having this kind of inner compass, this set of values and beliefs that defines who I am, no matter what. But if mind shaping is such a powerful force, does that mean myself is more malleable than I thought?
It's a fascinating question, the traditional view, is that we have this fixed, unchanging essence, a kind of inner homunculus pulling the levers of our thoughts and actions. But the mind-shaping perspective suggests that our sense of self is much more fluid and dynamic, constantly evolving in response to our experiences and relationships.
So instead of this solid, unchanging core, we have this more flexible sense of self that's constantly adapting and growing. It's like we're work in progress, constantly being shaped by the world around us.
That's a great way to think about it. Think about the you of today. Compared to the you of 5 years ago, you've had new experiences, learned new things, met new people. All of those interactions have inevitably shaped your values, your beliefs, your perspectives.
That's so true. I can barely remember who I was 5 years ago. But if our sense of self is constantly changing, does that mean we're just drifting along at the mercy of whatever influences we encounter?
Not necessarily. When we may not have, a fixed, unchanging essence, we still have agency. We can choose which influences to embrace, which narratives to identify with, and which values to prioritize.
So it's not about denying the influence of mind shaping. It's about recognizing our own power to participate in shaping who we are.
Exactly. We're not just passive recipients
Yeah.
of these influences. We have the capacity to become active architects of our own minds. We can choose to engage with the world in ways that promote growth, understanding, and connection.
Okay, that makes me feel a lot more empowered. But what about our relationships with others? How does mind shaping affect how we connect with the people in our lives?
Remember those self-constituting narratives we talked about earlier? The stories we use to explain our actions and make sense of our experiences. Well, those narratives play a crucial role in how we build relationships.
So if I share similar narratives with someone, we're more likely to feel a sense of connection and understanding. Like we're speaking the same language even if we come from different backgrounds.
Exactly. When we share narratives, we're essentially building a shared reality.
Mm.
We're creating a space where we can see the world through each other's eyes, empathize with each other's experiences, and feel a sense of belonging.
It's like those moments when you meet someone and you just click. You realize you have a shared understanding of the world even if you haven't known each other very long.
Those moments of connection can be so powerful, and they often stem from this sense of shared narratives, shared values, shared ways of seeing the world. But what happens when our narratives clash? What if I have a very different story about our relationship than my partner does?
That sounds like a recipe for conflict. Seems like things could fall apart pretty quickly if we're all just clinging to our own versions of reality. How do we navigate those differences?
That's where communication, empathy, and a willingness to understand the other person's perspective become essential. Instead of trying to convince each other that our narrative is the right one, we need to try to see the world through their eyes, to understand where they're coming from.
So it's not about winning an argument or proving a point. It's about building bridges of understanding.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that there are multiple valid perspectives on any given situation. Our own narrative is just one piece of the puzzle. And by listening to and trying to understand other narratives, we can create a more complete and nuanced picture of reality.
It makes me think of looking through a kaleidoscope. There are so many different facets, each reflecting light in its own unique way. And it's the combination of all those facets that creates the overall beauty.
That's a beautiful analogy. And it reminds us that even when our narratives conflict, there's always the possibility of finding common ground and building deeper connections. We just have to be willing to step outside of our own perspectives
Right.
and embrace the diversity of human experience.
Wow, this whole conversation has been so mind-expanding. We've journeyed from the mechanics of imitation to the evolution of language and the power of cultural narratives. It's given me a whole new appreciation for the complexity of human social interaction.
It's been a pleasure exploring these ideas with you. And as we wrap up this deep dive into mind shaping, we encourage you to keep reflecting on these concepts, challenge your own assumptions, be open to new perspectives, and remember that your mind is a powerful tool that you can use to shape your own reality. and build meaningful connections with others.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time for another fascinating exploration of the world of ideas.